Welcome to our homesteading video series, Natural Resources and Edible Foraging with CCE Saratoga County. So a little introduction, my name is Nicolina. This is a picture of me here. I am the Farm to School Grant Coordinator for Saratoga County, and I'm also the Livestock Coordinator. You can feel free to send me an email if you have any questions. You can also phone our office at the phone number below. And feel free to follow us on our Ag, Economic, and Development Facebook page. We're always posting things that are going on with our homesteading series, everything ag on with Cornell Cooperative Extension. So it's a good way to keep updated. So today we're going to talk about edible foraging. We're doing this through our homesteading series, and the reason is when we have our homestead, there's a lot of things that we put on our homestead, such as livestock, animals, plant gardens, and things like that, and we harvest, food from there and goods, fibers, whatever it may be. But a lot of times we don't think to look past the hedgerow or the tree line and to think about the things that we can harvest in the woods and things that are growing wild and natural. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about plants, fungi and berries specifically, and different ones that grow in our area and what they look like and what we can use them for, things like that. I grew up on a farm, more or less a hobby farm or a homestead, and we had horses, so we were big into horseback riding and really big into trail riding. We had a large sum of land, and my dad was a big hunter, but every time we went out in the woods, especially I remember going horseback riding, and it was always an opportunity that he took to point out things that you can eat or you couldn't eat in the woods, what they're used for and old remedies and things like that. So this was something that I always found really interesting. And I've actually learned of things that I never realized that were edible. So it was a lot of fun going through this, and we'll take a look at them and see. There are some that I found that were very interesting or delicious in the same sense to look at. So one of the most common, and I think everyone recognizes when looking at it, is the dandelion. These guys are actually edible. The entire plant is edible, from flower, leaves, and the roots. The taste of it resembles somewhat similar to arugula, but the dandelion has been used and has been very effective with digestive issues, gallstones, inflammation, muscle aches, and bloating. You can use fresh or dried petals as a garnish in salads or on desserts, and young dandelion petals have a honey-like flavor, so there's a little bit more sweet. Mature blossoms are bitter, but still nutritious, and of course they're very pretty. You can also dry the flowers in a dehydrator or lay them out in a single layer on a lined cookie sheet and place them out in the hot outside midday sun to dry them out. So instead of, putting down chemicals or something like that to get rid of these, what we consider weeds or pests in our yard, we can actually harvest them and eat them. So asparagus, this is a funny one for me. Growing up, out in one of our fields, it was our summer pasture where the horses were, there was this little cluster of a few of these guys. And when I was younger, I really didn't know what they were. And I didn't realize that asparagus grows wild in our area, but it was wild asparagus. And I was always in this state is when I recognized them, and they call it the mature when they look like small little baby Christmas trees. I would get like so excited. I said, Dad, there's a little tiny Christmas tree growing out in our field. And I said, you've got to mow around it. I want to see how big it can get. And, every year he would humor me and mow around it. And then every year it would die, and I would be so upset. And then all of a sudden every summer it would pop right back up again. But it wasn't actually a Christmas tree. It was wild asparagus. So wild asparagus is not much different from the asparagus that we would plant in our garden or we'd find in a supermarket. It's just simply asparagus that was once cultivated on a farm and it escaped. And they're very common in ditches, countrysides. Usually they like well-drained areas, but areas that have good access to water. So this is what they look like, and this is one of their more recognizable states. You'll notice it. They'll come in little clusters and they stand up. They're fairly tall, but they are not little baby Christmas trees that I thought they were when I was a little kid. It's actually asparagus. So next is chicory. Chicory is a really pretty plant, and I did not know that this was an edible plant. It's something that we always had growing in our pastures, and it was always really pretty, but it is edible. It often stands out alone in gravel areas or openly weedy fields, and the flowers open on a sunny day. Its leaves are the tastiest in the spring and autumn, as the summer heat tends to make them a little bitter. But they are also still edible. You can toss them into a salad, but before doing so, blanch them. They can be mixed with other greens to minimize their strong flavor, and the mature green leaves can be used as cooked vegetables as well. So this is what it looks like growing out in the field, and it really is pretty out there. And then big flowers, and then this is a picture of it all chopped up, used in cooking, which actually looks quite delicious. So broadleaf plantain, this is actually a friend of mine, we had a conversation this past weekend about broadleaf plantain and how it's edible. So this is a very common weed that we see in lawns. I know it's very common around our house, both in and out of our pastures. Horses having the lovely big feet they do, they can pack the soil really well, and broadleaf plantain thrives in compacted soil where grass can't grow. It also grows on my mom's lawn because we drive the tractors all over it. So very common weed. Everybody wants to get rid of it, and sometimes they have a really hard time because they don't understand that it's not that it needs to be reseeded with grass. The soil is really compact, but it is high in calcium, vitamins A, C, and K. The younger the leaves are much more tender and can be eaten raw, while the older, stringier leaves are best boiled in stews and eaten cooked. And the seeds are also edible as well. So this is the most common look of it, growing in our lawn, and it's kind of an eyesore. Here you can get a little view of the roots too, but these guys can actually be boiled down and eaten. And it's a great way to utilize something that we would usually just push aside and want to get rid of, and we can utilize this. Creeping Charlie. So this is also very commonly viewed at as a weed. A lot of people will get it in their lawns. We get a call at the extension office about it a lot. But this is edible. So this guy grows really close to the ground and forms a mat-like ground cover, hence, the creeping name. Being as in the mint family, the stem is square. So the leaves can be eaten raw or cooked. They have a mild mint-like flavor and can be tossed into salads to add a slight aromatic tang. Leaves can also be cooked like spinach, added to soups, stews, or omelets. Tea is made from the fresh or dried leaves as well. This wild edible has been added to beer in much like the same way as hops in order to clear it and also to improve its flavor. So if you guys have this growing around, it can be used in a lot of different ways. I was unaware that it was in the mint family, but it is. So it's probably why it grows so well too. Mint loves to take off. So, Creeping Charlie. So another very common one, and being that I'm a horse person, we see this in pasture all the time, is red clover. So red clover's most defining characteristics are the purple and red flower and the V-shaped stripe. So this is the V-shaped stripe within its leaves, which I do not make a very good V. I'm not quite the artist. And the flower has a big rounded edge. So this guy here, this is the flower head. The flowers will bloom generally from April through September. The clover in general are healthy to eat in any way, but they are best used as in a salad, as a cooked green, ground into flour, or blended with another to tea. Clover is high in protein. So right down here, if you were to pull these little guys out, they're very sweet to eat. I know that was something we used to do when I was a kid. I'd pull them off, and I'd pull out the little petals and eat it, and it was very sweet. The most common thing to eat in clover are the flower heads, like I was mentioning, this part right here. But they're easy to eat if soaked for about an hour or boiled. So wild leek or ramps. I was not aware that these were edible, and actually a friend of mine, a friend of mine, her and her boyfriend, they go out and they pick these guys in the early spring, and they love when they come up, and they chop them up and they saute them with mushrooms, and they're really, really great. So these are ramps or wild leeks. They are one of the earliest wild edibles to emerge. The leaves appear in early April and last up until around mid-May. As the May temperatures get warmer, the leaves will turn yellow and they will die. But you can look for them underneath dense deciduous forest canopies in well-drained soil that is rich with organic matter. So this is the most common place whenever we see them, when we're horseback riding or where my friend lives. They'll drive down the road and pull off when they see them. But these are all deciduous trees here. And you see there's no green on anything, and they're just sprouting up through the leaves. But you pull them out, and this is what they look like with their little root base. So they're very similar to, they're like in the onion family, but they're very good. You dice them up, you can cook them in. They're very, very good. So. Here's a very peculiar one. So these are getting into the fungi. This is called chicken of the woods, and I will not try to pronounce this because I'll just butcher it. Chicken of the woods is found growing on or at the base of dead or dying hardwood trees, most commonly on oak, but also cherry or beech. It can also be found on dead conifer stumps as well. Chicken of the woods has been known to grow on live fruit trees as well. So this is the mushroom that you would find growing in the woods on your dead tree. And this is actually a picture of it that was breaded and fried. And it looks like fried chicken. When I was looking at it, I had to take a double check. This mushroom is said to have a lemony, meaty taste to it. Some thinks it tastes like chicken, which gives it its namesake, but others describe the flavor as being more like crab or lobster-like. Very important with this mushroom is that be sure to cook it before eating it. Oyster mushroom. So this is a very popular mushroom. It's very common, especially in our area. It is characterized by its white spore print attached to gills, often with an off-center stripe or no stripe at all. They always grow on wood on nature, usually on dead standing trees or on fallen logs. The common name oyster mushroom comes from the white shell-like appearance of the fruiting body, not from the taste. So these guys do not taste like oysters. The taste of the oyster mushroom varies from very mild to very strong, sometimes sweet with the smell of licorice anisette. It varies in texture from very soft to very chewy depending on the strain and what time of year you pick it. They tend to be chewier during the colder months of the year. And you can also make delicious oyster mushroom Rockefeller and a variety of stir-fried dishes with these guys. So it's kind of a fun way to cook them. So morels, they grow as early as late April until the middle of June. They're likely to appear the earliest and likely to be found under conifer trees in the woods or along woods edges. Late May is when yellow morels are likely to be found in numbers. Morels are commonly found around certain trees, but not always. Ash trees often support morels in rich woods. Dead or dying elms are another common place to find them. Mixed woods with beech, oak, and other hardwoods sometimes support them. It is a nutty, meaty, and unique whether cooked or dried. So these mushrooms, they're really funny looking, and from what I've talked to people that actually go hunting for these guys, they're kind of a delicacy. We have a few people that stop by and they go hunting for them through the woods, but they are supposedly really great when chopped up and sauteed. So raspberries. So when we get into the berries, a lot of these guys are going to be very common. You know, you're going to see them growing. But the reason I mention them is because we think of buying them at a farm stand or planting raspberry or blueberry bushes, but these guys actually do grow wild too in where we live. And while we're used to seeing the berries that we buy from a store, they do look a tad different in the wild. The biggest thing is usually not as big, because they're just not bred like the ones that we find in farms and things like that. So when you go for raspberries, we do have them in the wild. You will look for these on the edge of forests where trees meet grass. They bloom in late spring and produce berries during the summer. So this is what the bush looks like as a whole. And then these are the raspberries individually. Notice they're not the big, perfectly symmetrical raspberries that we tend to find at the grocery store. They are much smaller, but they're still just as good, and it's great if we didn't have to plant them. They're already occurring naturally. And then these are what raspberries look like when they're in bloom in the beginning of the season. Strawberries. So more importantly, these are wild strawberries, grow in a variety of habitats ranging from open woodlands and meadows. These wild strawberries we have all over our property, and it is funny, I do notice them in areas of, you know, open in the fields to in the middle of the woods, in more shaded areas. They're kind of all over the place. But the biggest thing to note is wild strawberries is how small they are. They're little tinies. Not the giant strawberries that we're used to seeing at a grocery store again. So they're very small, but they're just a wild variety of them. They look very similar to the raspberries, but this is them in bloom. And then this is the strawberries on the plants. So they're more like in the grasses, you know, they're very low to the ground. If you've ever gone to pick strawberries, you know, at a farm, you know, obviously you would know that, but they are, they're little. They're not the big ones that we see in the grocery store, but we do have them in our area. So chokeberries. Chokeberries, I've had seen a lot, and I didn't really understand. I didn't realize that they were edible, and their names kind of give them this thought that they don't seem very edible, but they are. They're a shrub, and it grows in a distinct upright pattern. They have narrow, dark leaves and gray felted underneath. They're deciduous, turning a rich crimson or reddish purple in the fall. The white flowers are borne in small clusters. It has bright red berries, and since birds eat them only when the other berries are gone, they last in perfect shape well into the winter. So these guys will be on bushes well into the winter. The most common use is in jams, pies, and drinks, but only when a great deal of sugar is added. So that's kind of the big thing with these guys. They're called chokeberries because they are so bitter when you would go to eat them raw, but people do use them. They just put them in, whatever they add them to, they put a lot of sugar in, which makes them much more edible. So I wouldn't suggest just going out and eating these guys right off the vine. So next one is elderberries. So these flowers grow in umbrellas, which are, these flowers grow in umbels, which are some sort of umbrella-shaped clusters. So these are the flowers right here. And then once the berries form, they kind of flip upside down. That's what they look like. The umbels are normally 6 inches or so in diameter. The blue or purple berries are gathered and made into elderberry wine, jam, syrup, and pies. They can also, the entire flower cluster can be dipped into batter and fried. That was something interesting I didn't know. So these guys can be dipped in batter and fried. While petals can be eaten raw or made into a fragrant and tasty tea as well. So both the flowers and the berries themselves are edible. So here we have blackberries. Blackberries are one of my favorites. These are wild blackberries. They can be found on the edge of woods and in open fields. They won't be found in forests, but rather on trail edges because they do like sunlight. So they need a lot of sunlight for these guys. So these are what your blackberries are going to look like in the wild. Again, they're much smaller than the ones we see in the grocery store. And then these are the blooms, what they look like when they blossom. And blueberries. The location of wild blueberries can depend on the species. The low bush blueberry can be found in fields and in forests, while the sour tops grow mostly in woodlands. These are wild blueberries here, and they look really great actually. But these are blueberry blossoms, you know, when they're first in blossom, when they're all getting pollinated, and I did find them to be quite peculiar in regards to their shape, but you can see how they resemble the blueberry once the berries form. But blueberries also grow wild in our area, and they're great to harvest as well. So these are some of the resources that we used for our information. But so again, this was for our homesteading video series. This was natural resources and edible foraging. We have done adding livestock to a homesteader's backyard, annual vegetables, perennial vegetables, permaculture, and homesteading. We will be doing backyard chickens 101, water bath canning 101, and fermenting vegetables. So look forward for our other videos that will be coming out. If you have any questions, feel free to go back to the beginning of this video. My email and contact information is there. You know, we look forward to you guys seeing everything else, and we hope you have some fun foraging.